in professional photography. He opened a photography studio in 2003 and specializes in portrait, nature, travel, and infrared photography. His passion for photography has won him national and international accolades, including Competitor of the Year for 2007 and 2010 at the Crosstown Camera Club, several MSP Print Circuit Awards, Interclub medals, as well as a PSA Gold Medal. In 2005, Lars attended a judging workshop held by the Twin City Area Council of Camera Clubs. Since then, he's been serving as a photography judge in the Twin Cities area, getting called about once a year. Thank you, Lars, for judging, and we appreciate the comments that you are going to make to help us improve our photography skills.
Thank you for the introduction. And yeah, as you heard, yeah, this probably dates myself, knowing a wet darkroom. I don't really miss the wet darkroom. What I do miss, and maybe some of you folks can relate, I kind of miss the smell of the chemicals. That's, but it's, Photoshop doesn't have that, but for some reason I'm missing that. So again, thank you. I appreciate that you are letting me judge your images. If you wonder why the award stopped in 2010, I had a son to raise, and so from about 2011 to about 2020, I focused my main efforts on being a father for my son. And I in the past 2 years, I did more and more photography again. And this year I joined 2 clubs, Crosstown again, where I was an old standing member. And I also joined North Metro Camera Club. So I'm not only a judge, I'm also a photographer. And yeah, you mentioned some of my favorite subjects. There are also subjects that I don't necessarily would call favorites of mine. So as a photographer, I have a bias, but as a judge, I try that bias doesn't get in my way of judging each photograph fairly. So for each and everyone who entered the salon, I commend you. This is receiving feedback on one's photograph or photographs is important to gain as a photographer, as an artist. And you'll improve over time, not only listening to the comments for your own photographs, but also for comments that are given to other photographers' photographs. And you'll just watching the salon presentations, you'll see what images are effective and which images don't do so well. And so this is part of the growing process as a photographer. If I'm critical about your image, it's not meant as a criticism towards you as a person, but I hope you'll listen to my comments, see, or hopefully see my viewpoint, and use any suggestions that I might give to improve your photography. So let's look at tonight's salon. I was quite pleased with the general level of quality of images that were submitted. On the one hand, that's good. On the other hand, I had to make some possibly tough decisions where I had to decide which image gets accepted and which didn't.
Of course. Steve, are we having a projection problem?
Let's see.
It's
So I,
showing
I
the
see
directory rather.
I see the thumbnails.
Yeah,
maybe
that's all
window
I'm seeing.
screen. Maybe you have to do a full screen share rather than a window share in Zoom. So while you are working on that, I have a few more comments. I looked at every image on my hardware calibrated monitor. This hopefully helped look at each image with the intended colors intended by the photographer, or at least as close as possible if your monitor was or is calibrated as well. After scoring the images, I sorted each group of images for a score by alphabetically file name. So if an image gets mentioned earlier, that doesn't mean it's any better or worse than an image of the same score. A small exception to that rule is I would have the runner-up and the winner for a section shown as the last two images for that category. So your assignment was action, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
And
our assignment was action.
The assignment was action. So what I sometimes do if I don't know what it is that this salon is about, Google on the internet, and then you get some explanations on one website. They mentioned three groups. One group is suspended movement. So you use a fast shutter speed to freeze the action. And you can create images that would be imperceptible to the human eye otherwise. The split second type photography. Then motion blur. So if you have a slow shutter speed, then you can get blur in the photograph, and that can be intended. The blur can either be in the camera or in the subject. And the third group might be a visual flow where the eye follows the composition in the image, possibly meanders around, and that can also be an effective way to communicate action. So let's see.
Okay, let's start with the sixes then. And our first image that we'll be looking at is chasing a bubble.
So I like the idea, the concept of the bubbles and the child chasing the bubbles. To me, the composition is rather busy. There's power lines going through the image that could be improved by opening up the aperture so the background gets blurred more, and then the focus would be more on the child and the bubbles. As it is, there's that bright orange card, because it's so bright and so vibrant in color, it competes for attention, and it detracts from the image. There's two persons walking on the left. I don't know that they add much to the image. There's also behind the child that maybe is the father and a sibling of the child, with them being in almost equal focus. We get a merge, which also doesn't help the image. but I really like the idea. Go to a place, maybe an open parking lot, where you have more open space, no power lines or the handrail, the fencing on the right, and keep the background clean and uncluttered, and you might have a great image in the end. Next.
Okay, this is green light.
So when I learned judging, when I did the classes, we were told not to look at image titles, which I did. And just looking at the photograph, to me, it looks like a car that's almost like parked, waiting to race. But to me, it doesn't imply action. There's a little bit of movement by having the hot air coming up from the vehicle, so I can there's a sense of moving hot air above the vehicle, but it doesn't. If the vehicle is the main subject, the message doesn't come across very well. There's also that fence post that's right in the middle. Maybe stepping a little bit to the left or to the right, not to have that in the way might help. But regardless, it's still a very a busy composition. Opening up the aperture might blur the people in the background a little more, but in a way they kind of add to it. So another option might be to crop in, so you just show the cockpit and maybe the front part of the vehicle and show the people covering their ears. Next.
Okay, here's ice race.
So this one we have a more open composition. There's not too many distracting elements. That might be a school bus at the top, and then some orange fence posts in the background. Not too bad. On my monitor, the driver number 20, which I assume is the main subject in the photo, is unfortunately not quite fully in focus. That could be achieved by using, let's see. Yeah, it was a reasonably fast shutter speed. I don't know if a tripod was used. Waiting a little bit so that that vehicle would be not merging with the vehicle in the background would improve the image. And I would at least crop out the yellow part of the image on top. So that's the image. The eye is drawn to brighter or more stronger colors in an image, and after a while my eye meanders to that yellow area. Next.
Next is sword battle.
So this image I was struggling a little bit. I really like the idea, and with the wide angle view that we have, wide angle look, we're kind of almost in the battle. I think it's cropped a little bit too tight. The colors look off. There's a little bit too much magenta from my taste. It's a little bit contrasty. and I would open up the aperture. I think that was, I looked at the EXIF information and was photographed with a very nice lens, and you could open up like 2 or 3 stops, and that would help blur the background, which would help isolate the subjects from the background more. Next.
Here is why dinosaurs are extinct.
So this is a really a tough situation. You're at night, so you're limited with the light that you have, and you have these bright lights pointing directly at the camera. The one on the right doesn't bother me too much, but the one on the left really is very bright, and ideally that would have been not in the photo. Cropping doesn't work too well because then the subject is too close to the frame. So it's really quite difficult to create a good photograph in this situation. There's those signs too, with someone who's capable of reading and writing. If there's any written wording, the eye gets drawn to that as well. So the eye gets drawn to the letters and to the bright lights, which detract from the image that might otherwise be an interesting photo. Next.
Here's winning pull.
So I really like the idea as well. The dust coming up is the tight crop helps to focus on the subject, and really the subject might even be the person who's like sitting there and trying to get those really muscular horses to pull forward. There's a little bit of a merge. There's a half a person on the right, and then almost a half a person on the left that are covered. Of course, you have to, in these public events, you don't have that under control. You have to take what is there. It would be a stronger image without those persons half covered. Next.
Okay, we'll go on to the sevens now, and we're going to start with Anthony dancing.
So here I really like the idea. That was a great way of using technique, and this is using motion blur to convey motion. And this is where I was struggling a bit what to do. There's only the background here is in focus, which I don't, of course that was intended, but yeah, since the background is in focus, my eye looks at the background rather than the subject. This again might be a formal event like a powwow, and you don't have a choice of background. But if this is a friend of yours, and you can do that again, go to an open area, use an open shutter speed, and then let the background fade away. Then you'll have a stronger image. Next.
Okay, here is battle.
So here, this was an example of freezing the action. Unfortunately, the positions of the athletes doesn't, at least to me, imply a lot of motion. So if I freeze the action, I want to see that I know there's going something to happen. The puck is in focus on the floor as well. In a way, it's good, but it also means that it creates a static image, so it doesn't convey the action too well. Next.
Here is Catch It.
So here we have a sports photograph where the background is blurred. So we have some separation of that football player from the background, which is very nice. The football itself is a little bit blurry, which implies motion, which we would expect if it's in the air like that. There's a teammate with the same colors in the background, and that creates some merging. And I'm not sure I want to see that other photographer. The kind of when I played with this image, I cropped the image tighter so that we don't see as much of the red player either, and it's just the head and then the torso and maybe the football as a tighter crop, and removing the photographer, which is pointing directly at us, the way it looks like he's photographing the sports event, but the camera is directly looking at us, so it's detracting from the sports photo itself by pointing at us. If that gets removed, tighter crop, I think that will be more impact. Next.
This is Confronting Cranes.
So I like the square crop here. Sometimes the square crop can create a static image, but since this is an asymmetrical pose for the two birds, the square crop, the image remains dynamic, so that worked well. Unfortunately, the bird on the right, hang on. The sandhill crane, I believe it's a sandhill crane on the right. The eye is a little bit soft and seems to focus is more on vegetation in the background rather than the bird itself. So with the softness in the eye, that detracts from the image, but it's an interesting pose, and I do like the composition. Next.
Okay, here is horse number 3 flies around the racetrack.
I also like the composition here, and there's just ever so slight softness in the image on the horse number 3, while the background seems to be fairly crisp. So I would like to see it the opposite way, have the focus and the sharpness on the number 3 horse and the jockey, or at least on the jockey, and have the background be a little bit blurry. That would help the number 3 jockey and horse to stand out a little more. There also is a slight yellow cast maybe this was photographed late during the day, and this is like the sunset yellow. But I don't know that it needs that much yellow in the photo. So I would dial it down a little bit. I like that there's space on the right for the horse to move into. We probably don't need quite as much of the horses on the right. So the horse that's just galloping into the frame, maybe that could be cropped off by the nostrils. There would still be two other horses, two other jockeys in the frame. Next.
Okay, we're going on to the 8s now, and on the 8 and above scores, I will read the photographer's name as well.
Okay.
We'll start with Attempted Robbery, and this is by David Bergen. Sorry.
So 8, yeah. So now we're in the acceptances. I had mentioned distracting background. Here we have a nice example where the background is using the aperture well to create blur in the background, which helps the eye to stay focused on the subject, which is these two bald eagles. I didn't read the title first, and I just saw two eagles fighting, which is interesting. But then I read the title and I realized, oh, okay, robbery, so there must be something. And then I saw the fish in the top bald eagle. But even without realizing there's a fish, it's still an interesting fighting scene. The white feathers for the top bald eagle are a little bit bright, and that's an easy thing to dial down the highlights in Lightroom or in Camera Raw for Photoshop to get a little more detail. You don't have to go all the way down because this is a bright area, so the eye is attracted to that bright area. I also like the claws coming up from the bottom from the second bird, and I like the open beak for the top bird. It's a little bit soft, so, and there seem to be some sharpening done, so there's a slight halo maybe resulting from sharpening around the feather edges of the birds. But it's a really cool image. Next.
Here is Grand Marais by Mike Schrun.
So here we have an example where you freeze the action, but you still know that there's lots of movement going on because everyone knows that if water or spray is in the air, it's going to come down again. And so this is freezing the action, but you still have the implied action working for the photo. The image has a slight chromatic aberration to it. You can most prominently see that in that coniferous tree on the left. It has a green edge on its right and like a purple edge to the left. And again, this is an easy going to the lens corrections, an easy sliding the purple and the green from 0 to about 6, what I tried, and that will improve the apparent sharpness. So doing nothing else but by removing those chromatic aberrations, the image looks a bit sharper. But it's very dynamic. I like the position of the lighthouse on a thirds from the left, and the big wave is kind of on the thirds on the right. The horizon is on the third from a bottom. So there's lots of rule of thirds going on. Really nice. Next.
Next is Landing Crane by Marge Springett.
Again, we have a square crop, and but in this one, we have the background be more blurred, more out of focus. So the eye has an easier time to look at the subject without getting distracted. The bird is reasonably in focus, and the background is soft, which is nice. I would like to see a little more detail in the shadows, and again, that's just taking the darks or the blacks towards brighter slider in Lightroom or in Photoshop. Very easy to do, and it's just a global adjustment. Next.
Okay, here is Lefty Drice pitches a no-hitter for the Rochester Royals.
So here we have another sports photograph, and we have the background being blurred. It's blurred enough that it doesn't distract. The athletes are separate. So there's a second athlete, but it's not right behind the subject. It's a fun photo, kind of the decisive moment where the baseball is right behind the athlete, and he's going to in the next moment throw it forward. The shoelace in the air is a nice aspect, so that shows that it's quite dynamic, and I like that the athlete is kind of sticking out his tongue a little bit, so he's really into doing this throw as good as possible. Maybe doesn't need quite as much image on the right. So I could see that being cropped a little bit on the right. Next.
Okay, I should have mentioned that Lefty was provided by Mick Richards. Now we have Sharp Tail Dispute by Betty Bryan.
So when I saw this image, I thought, wow, this looks adorable. And again, we have a nice restrictive range of focus. The birds are in focus, but the foreground has been made soft by use of aperture and the background as well. There's what looks like a brown or a bush with brown leaves in the background. If that was more in focus, it would take away from the bird in the air because it's right in front. But since it's so soft, it does not, and so the birds are really nicely isolated, and it shows the action very well. The wings are a little bit soft, but that's expected because they're really moving around, but the eyes are nice and crisp, and I'm uncertain about that stick in the air. There's times where I say, okay, I want to have that edited out, but then it really adds to that. There's things flying around. They're really added. There's another stick in the air behind that bird on the ground, the left wing. So I think it communicates the story very well. Next.
Okay, on to the nines. We will start with LEC at CGV by J. Olson Goody.
So yeah, I don't know who LEC is, but I think CEG is like the Canadian Grand Prix circuit, something or other. So here we have a photograph of a vehicle. The vehicle is sharp, and we see and it was kept in focus, even though it's moving, because the photographer was panning, and that panning resulted in the background having a blur, which is nice because it helps separation, and it also implies the motion. The wheels are also spinning, so the wheels have a little blur to them. So all of these aspects help to convey the message of this vehicle is moving really fast. Next.
Here is Prepare for Contact by David Heemsbergen.
And again, here we are freezing the action, and it's kind of at the decisive moment. I would say you can just imagine how the rams are throwing themselves in the air and then ramming into each other with all their might to sort out their dispute. There's snow flying in the air, and it's seems to be created during bright daylight. So we see a blue shadow that's resulting from the blue sky reflecting on the ground. And when I looked at this image on my computer, it felt a little bit soft. I think there was some sharpening done to it. The pieces of snow aren't quite as detailed as I would have wanted to see, but it's a really nice action photograph. Next.
Here we have Spoonbill Liftoff by Marianne Dierks.
So photographing birds in the air isn't always easy. New cameras make it easier because they have tracking on the eye. I don't know if that was used here or not, but be it as it may, I like the framing. The torso is in focus. The wings are blurry, which is what I would expect because they're moving pretty fast. There's room, a little bit of room on the right, so the bird can fly and not leave the image frame. The color contrast is really nice. We have the pink of the bird feathers against the bluish sky in the background, which is also soft and blurry. So the bird stands up really nicely. Congratulations. And next.
Now we have our 10. It's Disagreement by David Heemsbergen.
So this one you have to appreciate on the big screen. There's water spray flying around, and the saliva of the bear is flying around, and I just don't want to be near those guys at that time. There's enough background blur so it stands out. The background is darker, so the bears are in the sunlight, so they stand out nicely. On my computer, it looked a little bit bright, so I would dial down the exposure by half a stop or so. But it's a really great image. Congratulations. And I think that's the winner for that category.
Okay, we'll move on to the creative category,
Great.
starting with the sixes. This is Golden Hour Moonflight.
Wow.
So I like the idea as well here. This is again some sandhill cranes, and there's a full moon, maybe composited together with the pink clouds composited together as well. The selection of the sandhill cranes is not perfect, and it seems the toning of the birds doesn't 100% match the scene. There's some good tutorial videos on YouTube that go into detail about compositing. There's a color matching that one can do or has to do, and then if the lighting is different, you can add some lighter areas to your subject, like the bird edges, or darken some areas to make it more believable. As it is, it's I like the idea, but the technical aspects need to be worked on. Next.
Okay, here is Last Stop.
So I like the effect that was applied to the image, but I'm really mostly interested in building to the left. I might also look at the landscape on the right. So I'm conflicted because there seem to be two images in here. One is to the left, one is to the right, and it's my eye doesn't have a good place for resting and looking specific subject in the photo in detail, except for there's some wording, and as I said, if there's a wording and people can read that, the eye gets drawn to that. And I don't think this in this photo it works well, because I want to see more of the building. Next.
Next is Sunflowers.
So this looks like almost like an HDR effect. With the two big sunflowers in the foreground, I would like to see those in focus, and the other ones can be less in focus. Unfortunately, it seems more like the focus is on the leaf, on the big leaf in the foreground, rather than the flowers themselves. I'm not a fan of the halo effect along the sky. So if you have a sky selection, you can try and editing that down a little bit, so the effect isn't quite as strong and less apparent. Next.
Okay, on to the sevens. We will start with 5, 10, 15 cents.
Again, I looked at this image and I was trying to, since it's like there's numbers at the top and there's some letters at the bottom, I tried to read it and I had difficulty reading that. 5, 10, 15, and then to me that was like a G, so it's a gent store until I saw the subject. So I really like the effect. I'm just not sure that this effect works well on the letters. I think something that doesn't have letters or numbers in it might work better with this kind of effect. I like the vibrant colors though, and yeah, I'd be interested to learn how that effect was done. Next.
Here's Fairy Tale Landing.
So I look at it. This is a nice photograph of a dove landing on an old tree stump. I just couldn't figure out why there's those puffs of smoke around it. The message was not clear to me at all. Even with the title Fairy Tale Landing, I'm having a hard time understanding what the story, the message is here. The bird itself is a really nice capture. So just by itself is a very nice photograph. I don't think it needs the smoke effect. Next.
Okay, on to the eights. We'll start with Elf in the Woods by Fred Sabatka.
I like the lighting here, the selective lighting. The elf is the kind of the brightest spot in the image, so the eye gets drawn to it. There's a bright spot to the upper right, and the person is pointing to it. So there's some kind of connection that's being conveyed. I'm just a little bit unsure about what that connection would be. Maybe if there was like a fireball or some sparks emanating from the hand towards that light, I would see the connection better. And there's those two planks, which I'm not sure what those would do. Maybe if they're facing the camera and they would say to the witch's house or something along those lines, it would add to the story. As it is, it just leaves a big question mark in my mind. The positioning is very well of the person. It's on the third line, and the head is about a third down. So that part is done nicely, and yeah, I like the blue, kind of a mystic toning to the image. Next.
Here's River Wolf by Melissa Anderson.
So this is like a high key treatment. I think that works well for this image. It really allows the wolf to stand out. There's might be a little watercolor or oil paint treatment to the fur. Maybe I'm wrong, it just looks like it, and that works well as well. With the fur being wet as it is, there's room on the left, so the wolf can walk in the frame a little bit to the left without leaving the frame. I like the background being misty or steamy, even though there's some darker tones in the background that faded enough so the focus stays on the animal. I don't think we need that black line around the edge, but that doesn't detract from the image. Next.
On to the 9s now. We'll start with Windmill number 11 by Ken Krautbauer.
So here we have a similar treatment, very vibrant colors to the one before, probably by the same maker. And this is abstract enough that we don't need to see all the details, but we understand what it is. It's a windmill, and there's a farm fence at the bottom, and then the horizon. It communicates that scene very well, and as I said, I like this kind of treatment very much. We're not talking about background blur or something. This is very abstract, but works very well. Next.
And onto our 10, we've got Hummingbird in Motion by Marianne Jerks.
And this is almost like an action shot by itself as well, except that it also has some effect treatment to it. It communicates the fast movement of the wings of the hummingbird very well, and it shows behavior, and the hummingbird is feeding. And we have that red flower where it's feeding from. The background is almost black in every area, so the bright the way the hummingbird was treated, so bright that it really stands out that way. Very nicely done. And I think this is the winner for this category.
Okay, moving on to nature, we'll start with the 6s.
So we have
and our first image is bee pollen yellow coneflower.
So this bee certainly is very laden with pollen. I would, the way it was cropped, I can see that the photographer wanted all of the coneflower in the frame, and leave a little bit of room on the right. But the coneflower, for the most part, is not quite in focus. It's almost there, but not quite. So I would suggest cropping it from the bottom. And I don't know if we have to crop from the right as well, but for sure from the bottom, to have the image be more on the bee as the subject. It's a little front focused, so the one eye of the bee is in focus, but then towards the back of the bee, the focus drops off really quickly. And these kind of images are very tough. I've tried photographing them myself, and just my approach is to take lots and lots of photographs, and then in Photoshop later on just throw away the ones where the focus isn't quite where it should be. Next.
Okay, here is Boreal Chickadee Hop.
I like the way it was framed. The branch, it's almost a little heavy. I might crop from the right a little bit. There's that gray area. From a smaller branch, I would perhaps crop that off just a bit from the right to have that out of the frame as a distraction. It's a lovely image of a bird. Unfortunately, it's a little bit soft as well, and there's a merge between the beak and the left wing of the bird. This is again where you take the motor drive and just hammer away and pick the best photo that you can get by with. I did some bird photographs last year in spring when the leaves weren't out yet, and I have one photo where the bird was just about to land, similar to this one, and unfortunately the focus is just a hair off where the beak is soft, and so I decided, yeah, that this is not up to my standards. Here's some motion blur. The bird itself is a little bit blurry. I think there was some sharpening done. There's some unusual artifacts that I attribute to sharpening. I do like this soft background, so the aperture was chosen well to blur the background. So keep at it, keep doing it, and eventually you'll get a nice photo. Next.
Next, we have Eating a Bug.
So I think these are sandhill cranes as well. Lots of sandhill crane photographs in this salon. So we have 2 chicks and 1 adult, and looks like the adult is feeding the chick. Unfortunately, the adult is there's a little motion blur in the head, so the adult was moving while the photograph was taken, and the shutter speed was too slow to freeze the action. It's a lovely composition with wildflowers blooming. The second chick is probably the one that's in focus, while the chick that's being fed that's a little out of focus. So where we would like to see the focus, it's just a hair off, unfortunately. Next.
Okay, on to the 7s. We'll start with Dinner at Sunset.
So what stands out in this photo is we have those darker warm colors, and then standing against that is the bird, which is in sunlight, and that really helps the bird stand out. So the exposure was done well. It has a little bit of room on the right, so it's The crop was done nicely. I didn't realize that there was a little fish in the beak until after I read the title. So that's probably due to the busyness of the water that kind of gets lost a little bit. It's a nice photo. Next.
Here is East from Swinging Bridge.
So I just happened to go there on October 1st myself. Jaycook State Park. I have some friends up there, and it was a nice fall day, so we went there for a hike. And so I kind of know that view. This is a hanging bridge, and so with people walking across that bridge, there's movement. And so we're taking photographs from the bridge. There's going to be more movement that you would otherwise have. So you have to adjust your shutter speed accordingly, or take many photos, and or wait for nobody to walk along the bridge, so you have a slightly more stable platform to photograph. As it is, there is movement in the rocks. I also find the blue cast, a little bit of cyan in the rocks. Maybe not quite being what I would expect it to see. The fall colors are nice, and there's some nice glow in the clouds. I like that too. The way it was framed, the river meanders from the bottom, going to the right immediately, and then going left again, and then afterwards going to the right again. So that has a nice pleasing S-curve to it. But the blur caused by the bridge detracts from the image. Next.
Here is Eye of a Coot.
A coot, yeah. So if it's this is quite a busy scene with the grasses sticking out in front. It shows the environment. Don't mind that. I would say that maybe it's a little bit over sharpened, a little bit too much sharpening applied, because the vegetation in front looks really sharp and not sharp at the same time. This is a very dark bird, so I would suggest taking down the exposure a little bit too. With a bird sitting like that, maybe it would have been possible to step to the right a little bit to get a more clear view of the head and a little bit of the wings. Next.
Next we have The Only One Left.
So if I got my did my research correctly, this is a wood duck female and probably a wood duckling then. Taken during bright daylight. That explains the strong shadows. It's a little bit soft. The background is a little bit it is in relatively in focus, but doesn't bother me since it's mostly just green or tones of green. So it's compared to the previous version, this is more pleasing to look at. I like the eye contact. Both birds, or at least appear to look at the camera. Maybe they don't, but it has the appearance that they do. And in both in animal portraiture, also in human portraiture, that can create a connection to the viewer. Next.
Here is 3-point landing.
So this is probably what I would call the decisive moment, right at the time of landing. It probably could use some brightening of the shadow areas that would help get some detail in the eye, which is like almost lost in the green of the head. And seeing the eye, that would help the image. It's a little bit in the snow, I would like to see more detail. Next.
Here is young chicks.
So more sandhill cranes. There's an unusual red or brownish toning done to it, and I think there was also sharpening done because the detail in the foreground vegetation, it kind of gets mushed around. It looks very unnatural to me. If with these kind of bird photos, you might have to walk around or wait a little bit for the bird to have a different position. This is what I would call a butt shot, so not necessarily the most favorable position of a bird. Next.
Okay, moving on to the 8s now. We'll start with Baby Moose Near Denali by Diane Herman.
So this also to me looked like there was a little bit of sharpening done, but it doesn't bother me in this photo as much. The fur looks mostly natural. The animal nicely stands out against the green vegetation. The moose is also slightly brighter in tone, so it stands out, and warmer colors stand out against cooler colors in the background, so that helps really focus on the animal itself. There's nice softness fading into the background, very nicely done. Next.
Here is Many Glacier, Montana by Mike Waterman.
So this is a nice, pleasing scene. We have the arch of a valley, and it's getting reflected in the water. There's some foreground interest with rocks. There's a middle ground interest in form of the reflections, and then the mountain in the background as well. There's some chromatic aberration in the water by the foreground rocks. I think that could be avoided by using those sliders in Photoshop or Lightroom. And this scene looked weird to me, and then so I looked at it for some time, and then I think what the photographer did here is darkening the sky, which by itself is okay, but he forgot to darken the sky and the water, so the reflection looks brighter on the water than the sky itself. Usually it's the other way around, and you see that if you look at the alpenglow in the mountain, it's brighter on top and slightly darker in the reflection, and same with the gray areas of the mountain. So I think this image could be improved by darkening the reflection as well to match what was done to the sky above. But it's a pleasing scene. The water is very calm. There's some fog over the water on the right. Very pleasing. Next.
Here is Strutting by Kathy Lauer.
So this, I think, is a snowy egret, if I did my research correctly. And it's really strutting along. The focus is done well. The background is out of focus where it should be. And we have an eye. It looks doesn't look at the camera, but it looks intent the direction the bird is waiting. So that works very well too. There's room on the right, so the bird can walk and still stay in the frame. It's walking into the sun. The brightest area in the image is the bird itself, so the viewer is drawn to that. Maybe a little bit too bright in some areas. Next.
Next is Sunflower from Ricky Van Dyke.
So this one, I really like the idea. Really cool, where a little sunflower is peeking through the rows and kind of defying the order that was imposed. The way the seeds were put in the ground. Unfortunately, this image technically is a little bit soft. There's some pixelation, JPEG artifacts on the leaf, right, which is out of focus. It's a foreground leaf right next to the main little sunflower, just above it. I would explore this idea. Really nice. Maybe tone down the red areas a little bit more to keep the color focus on the little sunflower as well. And some selective darkening on the leaves around it to really bring the center of tension home to that little sunflower. Really nice concept though. Next.
Okay, on to the nines. We'll start with Dik Dik by Diane Herman.
So I didn't know what a dik dik was, but now I learned it's a small antelope, and you can see by the horn, it has horns. I don't know if this was a wild park or actually in the wild, but we have a good use of background blur. There's a little vegetation, what looks like a thistle, and it's soft enough too, so it doesn't distract. It the way it is, it adds a little color aspect to the background, which I kind of like too. The eye is nicely sharp. There's a reflection in the eye, so that works well. We have room on the right. I mentioned that before. That helps the composition. Very nice. Next.
Next is Floating with Mama by Melissa Anderson.
So the two heads are roughly on the third position, aka golden rule, about a third from the left. Sorry, from the right, and they appear to look at the camera, which is always a nice thing for this kind of subject. It's just a little bit too bright. So on my computer, in Lightroom, I dialed it down by 1 stop, and they get better colors in the wet fur, and it darkens the water as well. But otherwise, a really nice image. Next.
Here is Golden Hooded Tanager by Marianne Dierks.
What a colorful bird. Amazing. I keep mentioning it, but yeah, so here the background is nicely soft, but at the same time the subject and the branch where the bird is sitting on is nicely sharp and in focus. So it's a really nice separation of the subject and the background. We have space on the right. We have a diagonal created by the branch going from one corner diagonally over to the lower right corner. That is a nice that dynamic element in the composition. The bird, the way it's posing, it creates a diagonal the other way around, and so the intersection of those diagonals is exactly where the bird is sitting. So that's really pleasing for the eye. Next.
And now the tens. First, we'll do Horned Puffin in Flight by Diane Herman.
So again, in flight, we are not always easy. Here, the eye really is what is in focus. The wings are a little bit blurry, which makes sense because the bird is moving the wings. There's a little bit of reflection in the water, and that might actually be nice to see more of the reflection. We don't need to see as much on top, but the exposure is good. There's space on the right for the bird to fly into without leaving the frame. The wings are at a comfortable position. Very nicely done. Next.
And Prairie Chicken Territorial Disagreement from Betty Bryan.
So we have another bird dispute similar to the previous one. This one is in the animal, in the nature category. We also have some action going. The treatment of this image is very similar, with the background fading into softness, and the foreground is blurred as well. And there's mostly just these light beige colors in the foreground and background, which helps the birds to stand out. And they're both arguing about something, so it's a nice behavioral shot. It's dynamic enough for the square crop that we have. So that works well in this case. And this is the winner, I believe, for the nature.
Okay, on to pictorial. We'll start with the sixes, and the first image is called Starting a Fire.
So this is such a great idea, and I like the choice of using the blue hour, so there is still detail in the sky. We have some reflections of across the water from like a house or home or something, but unfortunately, the what should be in focus is soft. So I've done photographs like these, and yeah, you want to, if it's dark like that, you want to be on a tripod, which I think that was done, and then you have to manually focus to pre-focus to where you want the focus to be, and then use an aperture to make sure that what you want to be in focus is in focus. In this case, since you want to have the sparks flying around in focus, yeah, you have to create the depth of field so what you want to be in focus will be in focus. Considering that the person who is spinning the steel wool or whatever you use might be moving, so where you initially focus, you need to have a good enough range to keep everything in focus. But try it again and see that you get it in focus, and the results can be really stunning. Next.
Next is The Boy.
So this is another cool concept with the leaves on those stairs. It looks like a fall color shot, and the apple goes along with that theme as well, since it's harvest season. If you have apples like that, what really bothered me in this photo is the bright red jacket or sweater that the person is wearing. So I took this into Photoshop, and I selected the jacket, and I turned that bright red into a more subdued orange or a beige or brown, and to kind of match the brown leaves in the background. And that image worked a lot better for me. That would allow the blue eyes to stand out or be the main point of attention in the image, and not this bright sweater. I'm not certain that the way the boy is having his mouth open adds to the image, but I think the photographer's intent was to show the blue eyes. So I would tone down those reds in the jacket to allow the apple to be in the photo, and then the blue eyes as well. Next.
Here is The Indian.
So we had a previous image of the Formula One car. It had it showed some pavement. So while here the wheels are like right at the edge of the frame, and that creates tension. I don't know if that was or is intentional. It would probably easier to show the image allowing some pavement so that it's not accidentally touching the frame, even though maybe it was intentional. I'm not sure about the background. There looks like there's a container. We have some merging of the motorcycle with the lettering in the background, and by the steering wheel, there's also some merging of rusty areas of the container with the handlebar. And this is a very high contrast situation. You can look at the shadow. The light is coming almost perpendicular from the right. And it's very bright, so we have that bright chrome reflecting into the camera. At the same time, because it's so bright, and due to the exposure, there's some details in the tires and in the engine areas that get lost. So one idea would be to either go for a later afternoon type photograph, or use a reflector on the left to bounce some light back onto the motorcycle, or use a fill light to add some light in those dark areas, and maybe trying to position the motorcycle not perpendicular or parallel to the camera, but maybe at more like a 30 or 45 degrees, so that the sunlight can reach those parts that are in deep shadow as it is. Next.
Okay, we're moving on to the sevens now, and we'll start with Arkansan.
So this one, I struggled quite a bit. So there's, at first glance, we have those two reservoirs, and they seem, they create a leading line leading into the background. But there's a compositional rule. It's called the rule of odds. So uneven numbers work better than even numbers. So 1, 3, 5, and so on. In this case, we have 2. So compositionally, it would be more pleasing to have a third reservoir in the background, which we don't have. So if there was like a dark or a large area for holding the attention, like a little bit further to the right on the horizon, there's what looks like a forested area. If that was more to the left, lined up with reservoirs, that will create a leading line, and then that could be the image. I also looked at the fencing, and I thought, okay, this looks interesting. And so there's a second image. If you crop off about half of the image from the left, so you don't show the reservoirs, then you have the fencing, and there's a corner of the fencing pointing into the distance, and we have some darker areas that line up further into the distance. That could be an image as well. So here, compositionally wise, I was struggling to find what would be a nice composition. I can see what the photographer tried to do here. In summer, we have these hot, humid days, and we get the moisture in the air, and we get the sun rays below the clouds caused by the humidity in the air. If that was the intent, then it would crop more from the like almost a third from the bottom. Maybe we don't even need the reservoirs, and it would be a photograph of the sky for the most part, with a little bit of a horizon to just anchor it to the ground. So next.
Okay, next we have Blue Angels in Flight.
So the shutter speed, I think, was chosen well. We have those smoke clouds coming out of the aircraft. They're suspended in the air. That worked well. With these formation flights, yeah, you want to find a formation that looks nice. The three aircraft to the right, 5-4, and then one in the back, they're nicely lined up, but the three and the aircraft behind the three, their noses are a little bit tipped down or tipped up, which doesn't quite go with the theme that the 5-4 and that other aircraft are starting with. Next.
Here's Desert X Party.
So this one I was struggling with as well. If possible, I would like to see more foreground, because I think the reflections are really interesting. But if I look at the crop as it is to the right, there's a little bit that wasn't quite cropped away, not cleaned up right at the edge of the frame. So maybe this is kind of where the lake begins, so you wouldn't have more reflections. But I thought those reflections would really add to the image. Having the colorful area juxtaposed against the almost white mountains in the background. Right now, the horizon is like almost in the middle, and it feels a little crowded for that subject at the bottom. Next.
Here is Early Light.
So we have some fall colors here. Definitely the reflections are very nice. Sorry, I'm gonna drink something. Sorry. I think it's a little bit bright. Just by going down with the exposure a little bit, adding a little saturation, you could emphasize those fall colors a little better. And the dark area on the left feels very, very dominant. Plus those rocks or whatever that is in the water to the left, and there's another what looks like a rock in the water to the right. I feel those maybe distracting a little bit. So my suggestion would be to crop those off, the rock from the right, and then those two rocks from the left, to go with a more vertical composition. That composition also would help emphasize those trees a bit more, the tree and the reflection itself. Next.
Here's Freddie.
So I'm not an expert in animal or pet photography per se, but as I mentioned before, I like seeing the eye contact if possible. I have taken photographs of of one of my friends' dogs. They animated him. Maybe this is what was done here as well, but the dog is looking intently just to the side of the camera. And I think the image would be more effective if the dog was looking with that same intent into the camera. The head can still be to the side, and the reflections in the eye, that's all lovely. The crop feels very tight. We don't need as much at the top and the bottom, but I would like to see the whole animal. So the back legs and the tail, I would like to see that in the photo as well. The choice of background is worked well. Soft background, and it's makes the animal stand out very nicely. Next.
Here's living in a bubble.
So here we have another of those bubble photographs. This one, I believe, works better than the first one because there's less distraction in the image. The fencing or the bridge, as it may be, I still find distracting, and there's the person that overlaps with the boy. If that person wasn't there and the fencing wasn't there, that would be a really strong image because the boy is almost perfectly in that bubble with the pose that he has. The time of day was chosen nicely too. The reflections in the bubble are colorful, and we have the colorful sky to go along with it. There's some reflections in the water. All of that works well. We have room on the right, which is the direction the boy is walking towards. So all of those work well in this image. Next.
Next is mushrooms.
So that must have been a sight, seeing that bunch of mushrooms all together. It's a little bit soft on my monitor. I don't know if there was a little bit of sharpening done to it, but I think there was a darkening done around the mushroom to maybe get rid of distractive background. For macro photographs, if it's not completely dark, that might work better because then it adds context. And the way the darkening was done here, I think the selection, if this was done as a separate layer, my recommendation would be to tweak the selection to be a little more accurate. The big mushroom on top, I think there's like 2-3 mushrooms on the left. Seems there's some blackness creeping in onto those mushroom tops that seem to me it shouldn't be there. There's a mushroom on the right. I don't know if that mushroom is actually like notched like that, or whether that was blackness introduced by adding the black masking. Next.
Next is panda at National Zoo.
So here I also see some signs of editing, especially around the black fur areas of the panda. There's almost like a light colored halo that actually could be avoided if you have the selection for the background and you darken the background. You take the inverse selection, and now the panda would be selected, and you add a little a layer where you darken just along the edges of the fur of the panda, by the ear, and then by the I want to say the left arm of the panda, where the fur looks a little bit bright, too bright. You can just darken that by retouching just the edge of the fur. It also seems like one stop too bright to me. The diagonal works well, and the cropping was done nicely to emphasize on the animal. I'm guessing the choice of black and white was done to avoid some of the brown discoloration that you might see in a panda from dirty fur. Next.
Here is Pigeon Falls.
So this one is a lovely scene, and I like that a lot too. Seems a little bit tight at the top and the bottom, and I would darken the dark areas a little more to gain contrast. Not the whole image, just the dark tones. The light tones with the snow and ice, that's right where it should be, but you could add a little bit of punch by reducing the grays into more like blacks. With black and white photography, I find that if I do a straight conversion, I typically increase the contrast by 50. Just because the eye perceives black and white differently than color. I do like the cropping choice that was done. If a wider lens would have been available, I would have liked to see a bit more sky, where that middle tree doesn't get cropped off. And maybe all of the pool at the bottom, or more of the pool, would have been visible. And with this being a tripod image, maybe take several images with a different exposure time. I like the motion blur in the water, and then where the waterfall hits the water, maybe I would use one that's like half the exposure time. And in the waterfall area itself, I would maybe use an image that has a quarter, so 2 seconds instead of 8 seconds, as was done for this image. That would add a little more detail without freezing the action too much. Next.
Okay, here's Wachipi Powwow participant.
So this is an interesting image, and yeah, portraiture is right on in my alley. So I like the vibrant colors in this. Obviously, this was done at a powwow, so you don't have much control over the background. But you do have control over how the background is imaged. And again, here, go with I would photograph this with one of my portrait lenses, with a 1.2 lens, to really blur out the background. So even though the background is there, it wouldn't distract from the image. So even if you have a 2.8 lens, I believe this was, let me check here, this was photographed at f13. So with that kind of closed aperture, you get a lot of detail in the background. If you open up, I believe that lens is an f2.8. Yeah. So if you photograph that 4 or 5 stops more open, that background gets blurred a lot more, and that allows your subject to stand out more. And as I said, since this is like a public event, you probably don't have too much control over the background, like the roof on the right. There's a speaker. What you have control of is not cutting off the feathers on top. And the face is slightly to the right, so I don't know if that person was looking at the photographer to the right of you, but see if you can create a similar image where that person is looking straight at you. Next.
On to the 8s now. We'll start with Backyard Fawns by Don Specht.
Yeah, I've never seen fawns like that in my backyard. I've had my share of wildlife, but never two fawns. It's a lovely image. The way they're facing each other, they're attending to each other. It's a tender moment. Almost a butt shot, but not quite. The light brown / orange fur, spotted fur, stands out nicely against the green of the grass and the vegetation in the background. So it's just a pleasing image to look at. Next.
Next is Brushes by Steve Plocker.
So I like this image quite a bit too. We're using 1 box and 3 brushes. So we have rule of odds applied twice. See if you can this is a still life, so it should be easy enough to recreate. I would like to see a little more separation for the brush on top, the round brush on top. Those bristles are almost the same darkness as the background. So if you add a little more light on the background there to add some separation, I think that would help. The metallic reflection is a little bit strong for my taste, so that could be toned down in Photoshop or by maybe adding something that blocks light, so there isn't quite as much light hitting those metallic areas. So in its studio vernacular is you're adding negative light by putting a black wall or something in that area to either avoid light altogether, or with a white wall it would reflect. If you have a black wall, then it doesn't reflect the light. But it's lovely tones. I like the brown approach, and yeah, nice. Next.
Okay, here is Friends by Melissa Anderson.
Now this is also a cool nature photograph. It's a little bit soft, but we have that eye contact by what looks like mom and the youngling on the right. It's a little bit overexposed. It could be knocked down by about one stop in Lightroom or Photoshop, and that would help to remove some of the glare that this photo has as it is. Next.
Next, we have Water Lilies by Dennis Kroll.
So we have three white glowing water lilies. So there's a rule of odds, rule of three, and they're bracketed by those colored lines. It's creating a diagonal flow from the lower left to the upper right in a gentle curve, and that looks very pleasing to look at. The exposure is done well. There's nothing that's bright that shouldn't be bright. It's good that the sky is black here. I think even if we had like a blue hour sky, I think that would distract. So the choice of having a completely black sky works well here. Next.
Okay, on to the nines. We've got Bass Head Lighthouse by Mick Richards.
So this one I looked again yesterday, and I'm not so sure now. What puzzles me is there's some. If you look at the lighthouse, there's some shadows that point to a strong lighthouse from the upper left, if you will. And I don't know that goes together with sunset scene where the clouds seem to imply the sun is like behind the lighthouse, maybe below the horizon. So maybe this was composited, but looks like you fooled me twice, and it only it took me a third time to understand what's going on. I would darken the area of the rocks below the lighthouse a little bit, just a touch, because that's seems a little bright, and I don't think it needs all of the rock to the right. So I would crop off the two fence posts, which where they are right now, they're kind of bright, so the eye looks at it, and yeah, it doesn't add to the image. And I would also crop a little bit from the bottom so that the horizon is on a third from the bottom. Right now it's almost in the middle. That would add more focus on that sunset and on the lighthouse by doing that type of crop. But it's a pleasing image. Next.
Next, we have Bluebird on Flower by Don Speck.
And that's a really darling image too. I like the colors. There's yellow, there's red, there's blue, there's green. We have some diagonals. The bird is on a 2/3 position, 2/3 up, 2/3 from the right. The one lily points into the lower right corner. The stem points from the lower left to the upper right. And here we have mostly blurred background, but it's not black, and there's a little hint of detail. So, and then that adds a little context to the image. Very lovely Never seen a bluebird like that. Next.
Next is Full Moon by Mike Schrun.
So after seeing the storm image of the lighthouse and then seeing this, my thought was like, wow, what a difference. This is, first image was where the lake is angry, and here the lake is really calm. It's a nice summer blue hour. There's people in shorts. The moon is rising. So you go from the lighthouse to the moon to the boat. The boat is returning to the harbor with seagulls floating on the water. The boat is pointing back into the harbor, so the eye can just circle around, and it's just a very pleasing composition. And the colors are lovely too. Next.
Here's Osprey 1 by Don Specht. Oh, I'm sorry. Osprey 1, Fisherman 0.
Fisherman 0, yeah. So this is a really cool, yeah, it's an action photograph, it's a nature photograph, and it has a strong story to it. It's amazing. You can see the water spray from the bird is just taking off again from the water. So there's water drops falling down. You can see the fish. And I like that the fisherman is not in focus, that it's blurred, but you see enough that the head is facing at that bird, and we know he's looking with contempt at the osprey flying away with the fish. That's a really cool image. It's on my monitor, it looks a little bit magenta. So again, in Lightroom, doing a global adjustment, going towards the green for the color temperature, from a magenta to green. It makes the gray areas look more gray, and the green will look more green also. Next.
Okay, on to our 10s. First, we have Monarchs in the Prairie.
So this one, yeah, I looked at yesterday again too, and that may be one that also fooled me. If this was taken all in one shot, that would be amazing. But yesterday I looked at it, and there's one hint where I think maybe this was composited out of multiple images. But nonetheless, it's a very pleasing image. I like the softness of the background. The butterflies stand out really nicely, and even though it's center composed, there's a nice asymmetry in the butterflies. Lovely image. Next.
And that image is brought to us from Marianne Dierks. Here's Metro Station by Mike Waterman.
Yeah. So we have some nice leading lines, and they point all to the middle of the image, and which happens to be where that bright headlight is as well. So the eye is drawn to the brightest area in an image, and the leading lines all point to that. Giving it the black and white treatment emphasizes on the lines and the structures. So that was a really good choice. The tunnel is positioned so it's on the lower left third position, and it fans out very nicely done. Congratulations, that's the winner for this category.
All right, well, that does it for our December Salon. Thank you, everybody who submitted photos. And a big thank you to Lars Michael, our judge, who we really appreciate your thoughtful comments. I picked up quite a few good tips tonight.
Good. I'm glad I was able to help.
Yes, thank you, Lars. This was wonderful. As I said, no more meetings this month. I'll see you all in January. Have a good holiday.
Thanks, Steve.
I'm going to end the meeting.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.